Yeah, I mean, I feel like some nights, like, you have it, and, like, even before the ball tips, and I felt like it was going to be.
DiJonai Carrington spent days building this game up like it was going to be personal. She talked about revenge publicly, pushed the message across social media, and made sure fans knew exactly how seriously she was taking this matchup. But once the ball went up, all that talk came crashing into one brutal reality. Carrington finished with just 7 points on 3-4-11 shooting, while Caitlin Clark exploded from deep and knocked down a career-high 8 three-pointers. And suddenly, the revenge game Carrington had spent so much time promoting became a nightmare playing out in front of a national audience. In this video, we're breaking down exactly how the build-up completely backfired, how Clark took control of the game, and how Sophie Cunningham became part of a storyline Carrington probably wishes she could erase. But the most surprising part came after the final buzzer. Because instead of letting the loss go, Carrington took the frustration back to social media, and what she said the next morning immediately had fans talking again. After all the revenge talk, the physical play, and the final result, did Carrington bring this embarrassment on herself? Stick around, because once you see how the entire night unfolded, the reaction afterward makes this story even more unbelievable. And if you're supporting Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and the Indiana Fever, let me know in the comments below.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we played with good pace. I thought we took good shots.
Let's rewind to August 8th, because that's where this whole situation really started. The Fever and Sky were already playing a physical, emotional game when things suddenly boiled over. During one heated sequence, DiJonai Carrington caught Sophie Cunningham high around the neck area with a clothesline-style foul that sent Cunningham to the floor. This wasn't just another routine basketball foul. The officials stepped in. Tensions around the benches immediately rose, and Carrington was ejected from the game. But instead of letting the incident end there, the story only got bigger afterward. Carrington took to social media, brought up the issue of white privilege, and pushed back against the criticism she was receiving. Then she added even more fuel to the fire by turning the August 23rd rematch into what she described as a revenge game. And that changed the entire atmosphere surrounding the matchup. This wasn't being presented as Chicago getting revenge. Carrington had made it personal. She attached her own name to the storyline publicly, which meant fans across the league immediately started saving the posts, sharing the comments, and counting down to the rematch. For the next 2 weeks, August 23rd stopped feeling like an ordinary regular season game. Fans began treating it like a grudge match. Sports shows discussed the tension. Podcasts debated whether Carrington could back up the confidence. And social media kept replaying the original incident with Cunningham while asking the same question over and over again. What was Carrington going to do when she finally got another chance against Indiana? Nobody forced that pressure onto her. By publicly leaning into the revenge storyline, Carrington raised the expectations herself. And that meant when August 23rd finally arrived, every camera in the building was going to be watching her. Every shot mattered. Every interaction mattered. Every mistake mattered. Because after 2 weeks of build-up, Carrington wasn't just stepping onto the court for another basketball game. She was stepping onto the stage she had helped create. And now she had to back it up.
So, first of all, I know what you guys are going to ask, and I did think it was a flagrant foul.
And this is where the contrast between the two sides becomes impossible to ignore. Indiana didn't spend the build-up talking about revenge. They didn't fire back at Carrington online, didn't turn her posts into a public argument, and didn't give the controversy much attention at all. Even Sophie Cunningham, the player directly involved in the original incident, stayed relatively quiet. She didn't spend days trading shots on social media. She simply prepared for the rematch and showed up ready to play basketball. Chicago, meanwhile, found itself pulled deeper and deeper into a storyline largely created by Carrington's own comments. What should have been another regular season matchup suddenly started feeling more like a personal grudge match, and the rest of the Sky roster had to deal with all the extra attention that came with it. And the story didn't stay inside the WNBA world, either. Once words like revenge and white privilege became part of the discussion, Carrington's comments started spreading across larger sports pages and social media accounts far beyond the usual basketball audience. Suddenly, people who normally wouldn't pay much attention to an August Fever Sky matchup were talking about it. Pre-game coverage increased. The tension became part of the broadcast conversation. Casual fans started tuning in specifically because they wanted to see whether Carrington could actually back up everything she had said. That's what made the pressure so intense. Carrington had helped turn an ordinary game into an event. And once you do that, there's nowhere to hide. Everybody watching knew the storyline. Everybody knew what had been promised. And when the ball finally went up, The only question left was whether Carrington could deliver. Because if she couldn't, all that attention was going to come right back at her. And that's exactly the trap Carrington created for herself. Once you tell the entire internet that you're coming for revenge on a specific night against a specific opponent, people are going to remember every word. There's no hiding from that build-up once the game starts. At that point, the scoreboard becomes the answer. No excuses. No changing the subject. No pretending the expectations weren't there. Carrington had publicly raised the stakes, so whatever happened next was always going to be judged against everything she had said beforehand. So, did she actually deliver the revenge performance she had promised? And why did her reaction afterward create even more controversy? Start with the box score, because it tells the story before we even get into the details. 7 points. 3-for-11 shooting. That's the line. After nearly 2 weeks of revenge talk, social media build-up, and extra attention surrounding this matchup, Carrington finished the night with just 3 made field goals. That's what makes the result so brutal. It took days to build the storyline. It took one game to tear it apart. And once those final numbers were sitting there for everyone to see, the revenge tour suddenly looked a lot different than Carrington had imagined.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we played with good pace. I thought we took good shots.
Carrington didn't come into the game looking passive, either. From the opening possessions, she seemed determined to make the matchup physical and personal. There were extra bumps after whistles, plenty of talking whenever she found herself near Caitlin Clark, and several chippy moments away from a ball that added even more tension to an already heated game. This was exactly the aggressive version of Carrington people expected after everything that had happened with Sophie Cunningham and all the revenge talk that followed. She wanted Clark uncomfortable. She wanted to get inside her head. And she appeared determined to make every possession feel more physical than an ordinary regular season matchup. For Carrington, this wasn't just about defending Clark. It looked like she wanted an emotional reaction from her, something that would prove all the pre-game build-up had actually gotten under Clark's skin. But that strategy came with a huge risk. Because if Clark refused to take the bait, Carrington would be left spending energy on a psychological battle that only one player seemed interested in fighting. And that is exactly where things started going wrong. Carrington kept bringing the physicality and the emotion. Clark's response? Almost nothing. And that might have frustrated Carrington more than anything she could have said back.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we played with good pace. I thought we took good shots.
Clark's response was simple. She barely gave Carrington anything back. No extended jawing. No unnecessary shoving. No getting caught up in the emotion. Most of the time, Clark would just shake her head, turn around, and get back down the floor like the whole thing wasn't worth her attention. And that may have been the worst possible response for Carrington. Because Carrington seemed to need Clark emotionally involved. She needed her frustrated. She needed her distracted. She needed some visible reaction that made all the revenge talk and physical build-up feel like it was actually working. Instead, Clark looked completely unfazed. Every time Carrington tried to make the matchup personal, Clark kept dragging it back to basketball. She let her shooting do the talking. She let her passing do the talking. She let the scoreboard do the talking. And by refusing to give Carrington the reaction she appeared to be looking for, Clark took away a huge part of the entire strategy. Carrington came in trying to win the mental battle. Clark acted like there wasn't one. And that's when the whole revenge plan really started falling apart. Because while Carrington was trying to create chaos, Clark looked almost bored by it. And once Clark started heating up from deep, that silence became a lot louder than anything she could have said.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we played with good pace. I thought we took good shots.
You could see the shift in Carrington's body language as the game went on. Early in the night, she still had that confidence. She was talking, playing with an edge, and carrying herself like somebody who fully believed she was about to back up everything she had said before the game. But by the second half, that energy looked completely different. The swagger started disappearing. The frustration started showing. Instead of controlling the matchup, Carrington was spending more time reacting to calls, putting her hands on her hips, and looking increasingly irritated as Indiana kept coming at her. And once the Fever sensed that frustration, they started attacking it. Whenever Carrington got switched onto a dangerous shooter, Indiana looked comfortable going straight at that matchup. When she handled the ball, the Fever pressured her. When she tried to use physicality, they answered with execution. The revenge story Carrington had spent so much time building suddenly looked like it was collapsing in real time. And while all of that was happening, Caitlin Clark was quietly putting together one of the biggest performances of her career. Even before tip-off, Clark had sounded confident. She talked about feeling good, feeling ready, and being prepared for big night. Players say things like that all the time, and usually nobody thinks much of it. But this time, it almost sounded like a prediction. Because once the game started, Clark didn't just score. She controlled everything. She found teammates in transition, created open looks in the half-court, and kept Indiana's offense moving even when Chicago tried to pressure her. She was getting the ball to Kelsey Mitchell, Lexi Hull, Michaela Timpson, and everybody else who found space. And that is one of the most overlooked parts of Clark's game. People focus on the deep threes, but she has become just as dangerous when the defense loads up on her and she decides to make the extra pass. Then you get to the numbers. 37 points, 10 assists, 8 3-pointers, and several of those threes came with defenders right in her space. These weren't all wide-open shots created by broken coverage. Clark was hitting pull-ups, step-backs, transition threes, and shots coming off movement. Every time Chicago looked like it might make the game competitive again, Clark seemed to have an answer. A deep three, a drive, a pass to an open teammate. Something that immediately killed whatever momentum the Sky had started building. And then you look at the history behind the performance. Clark became the first player in WNBA history to record multiple games with at least 35 points and 10 assists. Not just twice in the same season. Twice, period. That's what makes the statistic so ridiculous. She now has multiple performances in a category where almost everyone else in league history has only touched that level once. And that's where the conversation changes. Clark isn't just matching old records anymore. She's beginning to create statistical categories where she is separating herself from everybody else. That becomes even more impressive when you look at the way she scored. This wasn't a night where she was simply forcing shots until the numbers looked good. She was efficient within the flow of the offense. She hit off-ball threes after coming around screens. She knocked down pull-ups in transition. She created space with step-backs. And she seemed to make her biggest shots exactly when Chicago needed a stop. That's why the pre-game comments feel so different afterward. Clark talked like somebody expecting a big night, then went out and produced one while the entire building was waiting to see whether Carrington would deliver on her revenge storyline. Instead, Clark ended up owning the biggest moments. And the Fever didn't need her to do everything alone, either. Indiana hit 18 three-pointers as a team. That tells you this wasn't just one superstar dragging everybody else behind her. The entire offense was functioning. Kelsey Mitchell was a huge part of that. She finished with 30 points and continued the kind of scoring stretch that has made her one of Indiana's most reliable weapons. Whenever Chicago started paying too much attention to Clark, Mitchell made them pay. She got to her spots, hit shots in rhythm, and made it impossible for the Sky to load the entire defense onto one player. Then you had Lexi Hull giving Indiana another efficient scoring night. Hull finished with 14 points on 6 of 8 shooting, and that matters because performances like that force defenses to respect more than just Clark and Mitchell. Indiana becomes much harder to guard when the supporting cast is knocking down open looks. Michaela Timpson also gave them a strong performance inside, finishing with 12 points and 9 rebounds while making an impact defensively. One of her biggest moments came on a block against Camila Cardoso that completely changed the energy of the possession and seemed to suck momentum out of Chicago. And Indiana needed that contribution because they were playing without Aliyah Boston. Stephanie White had to rotate different frontcourt options and find ways to keep the team's identity intact without one of its most important interior players. Instead of slowing everything down, Indiana kept pushing the pace. They kept spreading the floor. They kept attacking. Chicago never really found an answer. Outside of Natasha Cloud and Azura Stevens, the Sky struggled to generate consistent offense. And when only a couple of players are producing while the other team is hitting shots from everywhere, the math catches up with you eventually. That happened in the fourth quarter. Indiana outscored Chicago 30-13 in the final period. That's where the game completely broke open. For 3 quarters, there were stretches where Chicago could at least convince itself that one good run might bring them back. The fourth quarter erased that idea. Clark kept making plays. Mitchell kept scoring. Indiana kept forcing Chicago to defend every inch of the floor. And suddenly, what had been promoted like a revenge game turned into a 23-point blowout. That's the point where the story stopped being about Carrington trying to send a message. It became about Indiana dominating a team that had spent 2 weeks living inside a drama Carrington helped create. The Fever didn't need to match the trash talk. They didn't need a confrontation. They didn't need some huge emotional scene. They simply executed better. And by the time the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard had already answered most of the questions people had before tip-off. But the story still wasn't finished. Because after the game, the conversation moved from the court back to social media. Carrington posted about what she believed was favorable officiating for Indiana, and that immediately restarted the controversy. Fans quickly connected the comment to her own shooting numbers and the final margin. That's why the reaction was so intense. When you lose a close game, officiating complaints are always going to be part of the conversation. But when you lose by more than 20 points and the opponent hits 18 threes, people are naturally going to focus more on the basketball than the whistles. And that's exactly what happened. Fans started circulating Carrington's comments alongside her 3-4-11 shooting line. The contrast was impossible to miss. For 2 weeks, the story had been about revenge. Then came the game. 7 points. 3 made field goals. A 23-point loss. Meanwhile, Clark had 37 points, 10 assists, and 8 threes. And she didn't need to say much afterward. That difference in reaction became part of the story, too. Carrington continued discussing the officiating and the larger controversy surrounding the matchup. Clark mostly talked about the game, her teammates, and Indiana's performance. Whether you like Clark or not, that contrast is exactly why the public response landed the way it did. One player had spent the build-up talking about revenge. The other spent the actual game putting up historic numbers. And when the night ended, those numbers became the strongest statement anybody made. That's also why this game could end up following Carrington for a while. If you publicly create a revenge storyline, people are going to attach the final result to your words. That's the risk. If you dominate, everybody remembers the confidence. If you struggle, everybody remembers the promise. And this time, the promise became part of the embarrassment. Chicago walked away with questions. Indiana walked away with momentum. Clark walked away with another record-setting performance. And Carrington walked away facing even more criticism than she had before the game started. That is what makes the whole situation so fascinating. It wasn't just about one foul. It wasn't just about one social media post. It wasn't even just about one bad shooting night. It was about how all of those moments stacked on top of each other until one regular season matchup became a referendum on whether Carrington could actually back up the story she had created. And on that night, the answer came directly from the scoreboard. 7 points. 3-4-11 shooting. A 23-point loss. On the other side, Caitlin Clark finished with 37 points, 10 assists, and 8 three-pointers. No long argument was really necessary after that. The numbers told the story. And while Chicago now has to deal with the fallout from a disappointing performance, Indiana continues moving forward with a team that suddenly looks deeper, more confident, and far more dangerous than it did earlier in the season. Clark is producing headline performances. Mitchell is scoring consistently. The supporting cast is contributing. And the Fever are starting to look like a team nobody wants to face when everything is clicking at once. Carrington wanted the rematch to become a statement game. It did. Just not in the way she expected. So now the question is simple. Did Carrington create this pressure for herself with all the revenge talk, or do you think the criticism afterward has gone too far? Let me know in the comments.